Hello, I'm Linda Means. Welcome to another edition of Candid Conversations. Our guest today is a resident here in Dover. Her name is Mary Waters Sayer, and she has written this wonderful little book, which I just finished and which I loved. I couldn't put it down. It's got sex, murder, mystery, suspense, exotic locations, everything you could want in a really good read. So, Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank
Nice to have
you.
here.
Lovely to be here.
Tell us a little bit about how this book came to be.
Well, I think so. The inspiration for the book came from something very small. I think that's often the case with many things. So I was living in London at the time, and I was rushing to meet somebody, and I walked past an art gallery and caught sight of a portrait of a woman in the window. Mm-hmm. And there was something about her face that just completely stopped me in my tracks. And I hurried on to wherever it was that I needed to go that day. But there was something about her that I couldn't shake. And in the days and the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking about her, who she was and why her portrait had been painted. But more than that, I was wondering about what it must feel like to have your portrait painted, to be looked at so deliberately. Then I started to think about it from the perspective of the artist and what it must feel like to look at somebody with the intent to paint them. And the more I thought about it, the more it struck me as really profoundly intimate. And the other thing that struck me about that was the fact that the portrait that I saw in the window was the same portrait that countless other people had walked past that day. Mm-hmm. So that what I saw when I looked in the window at the portrait was different from what they saw. And it was different from what the artist would have seen if he had looked at the portrait, and certainly different from what the woman herself would have seen. So I was kind of fascinated with the idea of kind of the subjective nature of perception and how that affects our behavior.
Fascinating. I've looked at a lot of portraits and never had all of those complex thoughts on the subject, but you're so right. That's very interesting. So from there you made up the artist, because I forgot to mention to our viewers that this is about the higher echelons of the art world in London and internationally, which was one of the things that made it very interesting. So then had you ever written creatively before? I know you did have a business background and did some writing.
I studied English in college and university, so I did some creative writing there. And then I spent most of my career writing, but it was of the nonfiction variety. So I was in marketing and PR for years, and I wrote press releases and marketing materials.
Different world.
Different world, yes, very different.
How did you make that transition?
It's interesting. I think that despite the fact that the two types of writing are very different, I think that my time writing in the corporate world really did help me when I started to write the book. I think it gave me a degree of confidence in my abilities. I think it acquainted me with the beauty and the terror of impossible deadlines. When you have to get something done, you get it done. And I think it also gave me a little bit of a thicker skin. I am accustomed to having my work edited. Mm-hmm. So when the time came, that was easier for me to take, and I think I was more open to that than maybe somebody who hadn't spent their career having that happen.
Touch one precious
Exactly.
So were you still working when you started the novel, or did you decide?
No, I had stopped. Yeah. So in the beginning, I don't know that I certainly didn't sit down and say I'm going to write a novel. It just, as I said, it kind of started out of that one encounter, and I think I was almost amusing myself in the beginning. It took me a while to realize what it was.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. How long, let's say from the time you first put pen to paper to the end of the book, we won't even talk about agents and publishers yet,
yes.
Did it take you to complete the book?
I mean, it's a hard question to answer because, again, it did start so slowly and so organically. But if pressed, I would say maybe 4 years of writing. I was doing it kind of on and off. So I think it's interesting with the first novel. you're really, there's no expectation of it being read by anybody or seen by anybody. So it's a different, I would imagine it's a very different timetable and a very different process to subsequent books.
You
So,
say first novel, which tells me there will be more. But
hopefully, fingers crossed, yeah. I
Okay.
am working on 2 things at the moment, so.
did you take any classes, like in the business world or journalism, as I came from? You don't write dialogue. There isn't necessarily a plot. You don't develop characters. Did you have to learn how to do all that, or did that?
Yeah, I did. I had the great fortune of, when we were living in California, I took a few classes at Stanford University, and I had a fantastic teacher who encouraged me and just challenged me and kind of dared me to finish it and to make it happen. And it made all the difference. I think to have somebody who you respect look at your work and say you actually have something here, I think it's incredible. It's astonishing the power that has.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I think otherwise you just think this is my fun little thing, but
Otherwise, it's a Word document on your
Yes.
computer, you know?
so when you felt the book was finished, what was the process of finding an agent and all the rest of it that brings it
Yes.
to our hands ultimately?
Yeah. So in publishing, you do need an agent. They essentially serve as the gatekeeper. So you get an agent, and then they represent you and sell the book to the publishers. And the way you do that is you send out query letters. It took me about 8 or 9 months to find the agent, which is not atypical.
Not bad at all, actually. What I hear.
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
yeah.
To find one at all is pretty good.
Well, exactly, and I did get very lucky.
Who
So
was your agent? Yeah.
my agent is Susan Golem at Writer's House. She's been phenomenal, just in terms of guidance and support and encouragement, and
And
really,
then how long
really.
did it take her to sell the book to a publisher?
I'm just trying to remember. So after she took it on, she's a little unique in the fact that a lot of agents, my understanding is they're very hands-off. They either take the manuscript as a fully formed thing or they don't. So she had some minor suggestions, some of which I took and some of which I didn't. So there was a little additional editing at that stage. So I would say from the time I signed with her, I don't know, maybe another 6 months until it was sold.
Okay, yeah, you were
Something like
more
that.
than lucky. That was all.
I was
really
more
pretty
than
wonderful.
lucky, yeah.
Well, let's go back to the book itself. When you sat down to write, did you have a clear idea of what the whole book would be about, or did it kind of develop itself as you went along?
I did not have a clear idea, again, because it started so slowly.
So it's going to be a portrait and a woman.
Yes, we knew that. So the first 2 scenes I wrote, and I'm not giving anything away, but the first 2 scenes I wrote were the scenes where the 2 main characters meet in Paris when they're young, in their student days. So that's one kind of fully formed scene. And then I wrote the scene where it's 20 years later, and again, I'm not giving too much away because this happens very early in the book, where the character goes to the art gallery and sees her face on the walls. And what happened was, once I had those 2 scenes, they almost ended up serving as tent poles for the rest of the story, which essentially kind of unspooled around them. And I could see the arc. I could see where the story was going from that. So it was interesting that it developed that way.
Yeah. We won't tell the ending, but did you
No.
see the ending coming early, or did that?
I did.
Kind of
I
come to you
did.
later?
I did see the ending coming early. That was written fairly early on. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, it is a fascinating book, a lot of
Thank
fun to read. I can assure
Thank
anybody
you.
who buys it or gets it from the library, they will enjoy it. Let's talk about you a little bit. Where are you from? And
So I'm from New York. I was born and raised in New York, and
New York City?
New York City, and then went to school in upstate New York. So I've
Okay.
lost my accent long ago, but
no, you
yeah.
don't sound. I don't know what a New Yorker is supposed to sound like, but I don't hear an accent. And you didn't pick one up in London, apparently.
No, I didn't. I think you have to be Madonna to pick up an accent that late in life in London.
And how
Yeah.
did you wind up in London?
I was living in California at the time, and my fiance had the opportunity to go to London to open up an office for the company he was working with. So we, who can say no to that? So we signed on for the expat stint of 2 or 3 years, and I went over and I started working for a company called Getty Images over there, and 2 or 3 years turned into 12. So
Another of life's little surprises.
exactly, and pleasures. Yeah, it was
So,
wonderful.
Your son was born in London? I take it?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
So how did you wind up in Dover?
So after London, we were in California for a number of years, and then my husband had a job opportunity in the area, and I have a very good friend who grew up in Dover, and she always raved about it. We looked at the schools, and it seemed like a lovely place. So we're going on, I think, 4 years now.
Okay. And what do you do when you're not writing? Any other?
Oh goodness. I think about writing. That would be the answer.
See if I've had some notes to myself that I haven't remembered to go over. So it wasn't your lifelong dream to be a creative writer, I take it. That just kind of...
I think I always harbored the secret desire to write a novel. I have always been a huge reader, and I've always found great joy in books. I grew up spending my summers on an island with no TV and no phone.
How wonderful.
How wonderful, yes.
That
At the
sounds
time,
fabulous.
I did rail against it, but in hindsight, yes, how wonderful. And so I read everything I could get my hands on, and I read books that were way too old for me. But I think that's always a good place to start, is I have a huge reverence for the written word, and to be able to contribute to something that's brought me such joy is really just delightful.
I can imagine. Who are your favorite writers?
Oh gosh, too many to list. I'm a huge fan of Marilynne Robinson. She wrote Gilead and numerous other books. I think she's just a treasure. I love George Saunders. I think he's hysterical and original and lovely. I recently read Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff. I think she's incredibly talented. I think we all love Anne Patchett. I think we all want to be Anne Patchett. Yes. Many.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
I wish you luck with your future ventures. I know there is a book in your head at the moment, but
indeed.
we can't talk about that.
Yes,
right?
yes,
So,
no.
I think Dover is very lucky to have you. And to our viewers, once again, The Blue Bath by Mary Waters Sayer. Highly recommend this book. And thank you for tuning in once again to Candid Conversations.